Welcome to iRise Conversations with Joan. Welcome to iRise Conversations with Joan. My name is Joan Nwosu, and I'm the award-winning author of the book, iRise, The 10 Secrets to Getting Up When Life Knocks You Down. Betrayal hurts, whether it's from a spouse, from a parent, a friend, or even if it's from yourself. We all go through life with different experiences, and many of them will be unpleasant. We will be hurt by people we trust the most, the people closest to us, the people we share everything with, the people we give our hearts to. The impact of this trauma, betrayal, can be detrimental to our health and our mental well-being. This trauma can follow you for a very, very long time, eating deep into your soul and stopping you from experiencing the beauty in the world. Today, we'll be discussing betrayal trauma and how you can heal from it to go on to have a wonderful life. Our guest today is Mr. J. He is a betrayal trauma practitioner and interpersonal relationship coach. He holds a master's degree in education. He is ministry credentialed, a certified special education teacher. He's the author of a children's book, I Am Loved Right Where I Am. He is also a veteran of the United States military, an inspirational public speaker, an adoptive parent, and so much more. He stands by his motto, which is the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for all other relationships around you. And he says that relationships can break you, but even broken crayons can create beautiful masterpieces. Welcome, Mr. J, to the show.
Thank you so much, Joan. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. So before we get started talking about betrayal trauma, let's learn a little bit about you and your personal journey.
Oh, geez, you got a few days? Lord, where do I start? Am unfortunately a product of divorce, and I say unfortunately because there's a lot of amicable and civil divorce, and which is great, and then there's those World War III divorces, and I think that's where some of the trauma came in, with me. But I had a lot of trauma in my childhood to various degrees. And when I got older, I actually became at first what's called an intrapersonal relationship coach. And what that is I help people with the relationship they have with themselves. Because I always say the relationship people have with themselves sets the tone and standard for all other relationships around us. Mm. Then what happened was about 2 years ago, my father died abruptly. And when I mean abruptly, I mean I was talking to him on the phone, laughing, we were having a great time. And 4 days later, I was burying him into the ground. And we had a very, very close relationship, my father and I. So what happened was a couple of days after that, I woke up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. And actually a panic attack. Now, I've never had a panic attack. And when people used to tell me about panic attacks, I took them lightly because I was like, no, it's just, stress or anxiety. They literally feel like you're having a heart attack. It's so true. There's no substitute for experience. So I woke up in the middle of the night with a panic attack and I smelled smoke. And I got young kids. So I went all around my house and I'm trying to smell where the smoke is coming from, and I'm in the kitchen and I'm downstairs and I'm upstairs. And I even opened up my door to see if my neighbors were, had their fireplace on or something in the middle of the night. And I could not find the origin of this smoke. And there was no smoke, but I did smell it. Anyways, I went to lay back in bed. And as soon as my head hit the pillow, I was immediately transported to when I was 6 years old, standing next to my mother when she was looking at our house that burned down from a house fire. And so basically we left the house for the weekend. And when we came back, we pulled into our driveway and there was just the chimney. That's all. Family heirlooms, toys, you name it. So we had to stay at the rescue mission for a little while. Anyways, long story short, after my father's death, a lot of trauma came up that I did not deal with, did not heal. And that sent me on a long journey of trauma, and which got me very interested in the whole field of betrayal trauma. I think because the number one person that causes betrayal trauma often is ourselves, for many reasons, which we can get into. But anyways, so long story short, I got involved in a community And within that community, the founder of that community said, I see you helping out a lot of our members. Would you want to be certified as a betrayal trauma practitioner? I was like, oh, okay, maybe. So I went through the certification process, and next thing you know, I'm not only an intrapersonal relationship coach, I'm also a certified betrayal trauma practitioner. And, I say this, it's good and bad. My calendar is probably booked about 3 months out. So in one way, that's great because I'm working a lot. On another hand, it's sad because I'm working a lot because I'm working hard to put myself out of a job because my heart aches for people that go through trauma and betrayal trauma because I understand, and it's not a fun thing to endure and live with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, sorry about your dad passing. I lost my dad last week, so I know that feeling very too well.
Yeah, I'm very sorry too. Yeah, yeah.
Never ready for it. Okay. So betrayal trauma, because I know people know about different types of trauma. So what is betrayal trauma and how is it different from other types of trauma?
Okay, so first of all, we all experience trauma to some degree in our life, and we all experience betrayal, and that's big B or little b, and that's big T and little t. And to some extent, the majority of us do experience a betrayal trauma. But one of the differences is betrayal trauma is usually at the hands of somebody we rely upon.
Okay.
So, if you find out somebody's stealing your Amazon packages or something on your porch and it's, somebody you don't know, that's infuriating and it's upset, but it's different when you find out it's your sister or your mother or your spouse. So, or your boss. So it's somebody who we rely on. Now, betrayal trauma, I call it life-altering powerlessness. Because the minute you find out the person that you loved and trusted the most took the best of you and hurt you in the worst possible ways, it is a pain that's inconceivable. And there's so much that goes on. I tell people all the time, if you could just imagine with me for a second, imagine there's a very, very thin bridge about a mile above Earth, okay? And it's a mile long. And under that bridge is an active volcano and fire. And you're on that bridge. And let's just say, you have 2 young kids and you're holding your kids and you're trying to walk across that bridge. It's a very thin bridge. It's a very long bridge. And the volcano and the fire beneath your feet is so hot. You feel the soles of your feet burning. It's so hot. And you got your 2 kids in both arms. And the person leading you to safety is the person you love and trust the most in life. Let's just say it's your partner, your spouse, your significant other. And as you're walking, Joan, the smoke is so blinding, you often have to put your hands on the person in front of you, your partner, your spouse, your significant other, just so they can lead the way. And before you know it, you got your 2 babies and the bridge collapses. And you're falling to, you're going to die. You're falling to your death with your 2 babies. Your brain is hijacked. You're worrying about your babies. You don't know. Your brain is completely hijacked. And you look up and you see the person you trusted the most is holding a hammer. They're the bridge. Now you're all screwed up. And then you fall into the fire and you don't die. That's betrayal trauma.
Yeah.
It's complex and it's profoundly hurtful.
It is. It is just the way you described it. And I think we'll get into it anyway, but I think everyone will go through it in this life. Like there's no escape in this.
Unfortunately.
There's no escape in this. So, you mentioned that it could be your significant other, it could be your parent, a close friend, even your boss at work. So anybody that you trust who betrays you you can suffer from betrayal trauma. So I know
including some people even feel betrayed by God or their creator, and some people feel betrayed by themselves. Like, for instance, I talk to women who are like, listen, I exercised, I meditated, I drank all my smoothies, and I was still diagnosed with breast cancer. I feel like my body betrayed me, or I feel like my creator betrayed me. So yeah, betrayal trauma, is extensive.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's great. Because I was just going to ask, like, how would someone know what type of betrayal? First of all, how do I even diagnose myself that I'm suffering from betrayal trauma? For you, it was profound. You felt it. You lay down and you had all these feelings come back to you. But for a lot of people, they're just going on with what they think is life. And they don't know what the adverse effect of the trauma is. They don't even know that they're carrying any trauma. What are some of the telltale signs for people to be able to look back and say, whoa, I might be suffering from betrayal trauma and I need to deal with it?
Yeah, well, a couple things. Great question, by the way. A couple things. So trauma in general is anything that overwhelms our coping mechanisms. And that's different for everybody. You and me can go out right now, and let's just say there's, unfortunately, God forbid, a mass shooting, right? I could be traumatized from that, and you might not be, because it all depends on so many things: your support system, your resiliency, your childhood, previous trauma. I mean, there's so much that involves in it. So that's number one. Number two, if something doesn't affect you to the point where you're aware of it, then 9 times, usually you can say my coping mechanisms have dealt with it. Now, a lot of times that doesn't always apply, because a lot of times people find themselves in addictions, whether it's porn addiction, sex addiction, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and they can't understand why, but there is a root of it, of some type of trauma or betrayal trauma. Now, some ways to overcome it. I mean, we can spend years doing this, but or some ways to see if we have trauma or betrayal trauma is, do we have a heightened sense of hypervigilance? Like, for instance, if let's just say somebody came from an abusive relationship in the past, physically abusive, and they're talking to somebody, and somebody just notices a little piece of hair on their mouth, and they go to take it away, and all of a sudden they're like, this, because they're, which, by the way, that's called abreaction. It's a trauma response. That's the psychological term for abreaction, but it's a trauma response that's even subconscious. People oftentimes aren't even aware that they do it. I talk with people. I talk with people that have been. I don't want to get too in depth because I don't want to disturb your viewers, but people have a lot of bodily functions that don't work accurately because they were traumatized and used and abused. So, usually there's telltale signs, but sometimes you do have to do a little digging. And now keep in mind, betrayal trauma hits us at our core insecurities. So a good way to start is try to look at your core insecurities, and there's ways to do that, and say, okay, was there any wounds or trauma around there? I mean, there's a bunch of different things to do. I'm just giving you a couple.
Yeah, there's a couple. And I think that can help people get started, because core insecurities, I think everybody knows what they are. Like, you don't have 100%. You don't have to dig too deep for that. But even the one that you described, the abreaction, I think even I do that. Like, if someone tries to touch me, it's like, whoa, get your hands off me. And
yeah. Now, the psychological term is called abreaction. I call it psychological scarring. So, for instance, if I come up to you right now and I kind of pat you on the back, I'm like, hey, Joan, how's life? You're like, hey, going, thriving, paying bills, doing what I got to do. But if you had a 3rd-degree burn on your back, and I go up to you and say, hey, Joan, how you doing? You're like, ow, big difference. Yeah. And that's abreaction, is when you have existing trauma, you're going to react completely different because there's psychological scarring.
Okay, good, great. So for people who we're all carrying all this trauma around us, what are some of the disadvantages of not dealing with it? Because some people just don't believe in therapy. They're like, I'm good, I can cope, I'm all right. Hey, everybody's messed up anyway, life's good, and I'll just keep grinding. What are some of the things that people should be aware of if you don't deal and heal from your trauma, betrayal trauma?
All right, I'm going to use a little street slang right here and say there's mad disadvantages of not dealing with your trauma. Listen, give me something: spiritual, financial, emotional, mental, physical. It affects every area, every area. Listen, people that don't deal with trauma. Okay, have you ever been to a masseur? And, initially you go to a massage therapist, you're thinking, oh, this is going to feel so good, a full body. Then you lay on the table and they start working out these kinks and you're almost crying. You're like, oh, dude, stop. What are you doing? That's trauma in our body. Okay. That's like trauma in our body. It's like a ball of trauma in our body. What a massage therapist is doing is they're really trying to massage that knot out of your body, because if not, that knot is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, you're hunched back, or you can't turn your head, or you're waking up sore. That's the same thing with trauma. I talk to people that don't deal with trauma, and they have no hair or major hair loss because of the stress and anxiety of the trauma. I talk to people all the time that now are in addictions, porn addiction, sex addiction, alcohol addiction, because they're trying to numb or distract or avoid or cope with something because they're not dealing with their trauma. There's people that hate life because think about it. Hypothetically speaking, let's just say I'm dealing with a male-female couple, right? And the male steps out and has sex with a girl named Kelly, right? And Kelly happens to be a nurse. So this is what happens. First of all, you hate Kelly. You hate the name Kelly. If you come across a cash register person, her name's Kelly, you want to take out a knife and do her in. Okay. Next thing you know, you don't like nurses now because Kelly's a nurse. You don't deal with your trauma. You hate all Kellys. You hate all nurses. Next thing you know, nurses work at a hospital. They work with doctors. I don't trust doctors. I can't stand doctors. Next thing you know, it's like, I'm not going to go to the hospital. I don't trust hospitals. If you don't deal with your trauma, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it affects every area of your life financially, because listen, if you got health issues, you're going to spend a lot more money on your health, spiritually, a lot of people have a hard time with their creator after trauma because they're like, God, whoa. I prayed for a spouse. I knew for certain you gave me this spouse and you allowed this. You betrayed me, God. So people in every area, it affects every area.
Wow. Okay. Like you're speaking, it's like yes. There's a lot of damage that could happen if people don't deal with the trauma. Okay, so I want to take it back a little bit personal now. So I had a lot of trauma growing up, especially with my parents. And I like to think that I've healed from the trauma, but from time to time I get triggered. And most times when the triggers come, I'm not able to control it because I don't even see it coming. Like it's hit me before, I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. So how can people who maybe haven't healed or have healed, how can they be aware of the triggers so that they don't keep slipping back into that betrayal trauma?
Okay. First, let me just say this. In my personal opinion, and I say that because you're going to have other mental health professionals that disagree with me, I don't believe you heal from trauma. I believe there's some aspects that you can heal from, but what happens is that you absorb it and you mature and you grow with it. Listen, are you ever going to get over a close family member's death? No, you just learn how to manage it better each day. The same thing with trauma. You never get over it. You just learn how to manage it, cope with it, and have a handle on it. That's number one. Number two, I'm sorry, did you ask me some tips on how to handle triggers? I apologize.
How to handle triggers, how to be aware of what my triggers are.
Yeah. So first of all, okay. So our amygdala, which is the reptilian part of our brain, that's what's in charge of our fight or flight, our nervous system. Well, there's a couple F's: fight, flight, fawn, and I created F-it because there's also an F-it one too, where you're just indifferent.
Yeah.
Some people fight, some people flight, some people fawn, some people freeze, some people are like,
whatever.
You want to go cheat? Go cheat. You want to pay the bills? Pay the bills. F-it. So I came up with the F-it one. So what happens with our amygdala is that is constantly searching, scanning our surroundings. Where's trouble? Where's trouble? And listen, our amygdala, and for females, I have females call their amygdala Amy because you spell amygdala A-M-Y. And I have my male clients call their amygdala Elmo because our amygdala is shaped like an almond. So A-L-M-O. And here's the deal. Amy is your best friend, but she's also sometimes your worst enemy. And I'll tell you why. Because Amy does a very good job scanning to say you're safe, right? But here's the deal. Sometimes when we're traumatized, we have filters that are injured. And what Amy likes to do is say, there's danger, when there's no danger. So this is why I'm saying there might be, unfortunately, a lifelong process of triggering. So it's not to say you can't get rid of your triggers. It's how to help process them when they come. Now, you can reduce triggers, don't get me wrong, and you can make them where they, help where they're very seldom. But once you're, it's like an addict. Once an addict, always vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Once you're traumatized, you're always going to be vulnerable, to whatever that is. Okay, so one of the things I tell people with triggers, or what they call is flashbacks or emotional flooding, is number one, keep in mind, triggers are here to inform us They're not here to threaten us. The threat's already passed. So they're just here to inform us. And so sometimes you want to say, okay, Amy, I hear you. What are you trying? What do you need? You know, because sometimes when we feel unsafe, we feel triggered. So you want to ask Amy, okay, what do you need? Oh, you need to feel safe. And then you come up with how you can make yourself feel safe, oh, I'm triggered. Okay, Amy, what do you need? I need to feel loved. How can I make you feel loved? I could use a hug. If somebody is around you to give you a hug, fine. If not, hug yourself. So triggers are here to inform us, not to threaten us. The threat's already gone, Then there's a bunch of these grounding techniques, such as the rainbow technique. Look around and try to see in everywhere in your surroundings, if you can see something that has the colors of the rainbow. Roy G. Biv. I don't know if you learned that in school. So red. Okay, what do I see that's red? Orange, whatever. Another thing, too, that I think is very good is when you are triggered, your frontal cortex, your logical brain is hijacked. You're thinking emotionally with your amygdala. So I immediately recommend people start throwing out math facts, because when you're doing math, you have to engage your logic side of your brain. So, if people are triggered, it's like 10 times 10 is 100, 10 minus 3 is 7. Engage your frontal logic, Sometimes I tell people, this is in the beginning stage of trigger. Sometimes I tell people, put a rubber band around your wrist and snap it to snap yourself out of it. So there's a bunch of different things that you can do. There's breathing techniques. There's EFT, which is tapping, tap and talk, whatever. So there's a bunch of different techniques. You have to sometimes smiling, because smiling tricks our nervous system into thinking all is good in the hood. And so, you're triggered, but I don't have to tell you, sometimes triggers come and you could be showering, having sex, or doing the dishes. And if a big trigger comes, you can be on your knees, literally. I mean, they don't play, those triggers.
Yeah. Wow. But you've given us a lot of tips on how to manage the trigger, at least identify the triggers, and to reduce the triggers as much as possible. Okay. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to talk about forgiveness, because in some people think forgiveness is the same as, healing or trying to be better with your trauma, deal with your trauma. In your opinion, is it the same? Do you have to forgive?
Okay, well, I hope you've learned by now. You just don't ask me a question, I'm going to give you a simple answer. I'm going to go back to the 60s and start there. I'm just kidding. No, a couple things. A couple things. Like everything else, Joan, if you ask 100 different people their definition of forgiveness, you're going to get 100 different answers. That's number one. Number two, as I'm sure you've heard, or your listeners, we don't forgive necessarily for the other person. We forgive because we're no longer going to wear those shackles. We're no longer going to carry that burden. Now, what you have to do is you have to come up with your own definition of forgiveness, because so many times we throw around this term forgiveness, and and people will say, well, I've forgiven so-and-so. And I'll say, okay, I got it. What's your definition of forgiveness? I don't know. How did you give something away that you don't know what you gave away? How did you give somebody something you didn't have to give? Also, on top of that, the first person we should be forgiving is ourselves. Forgiving ourselves for any pink flags we missed, any red flags we didn't address, any gut intuitions that we suppressed and we didn't look into. First person we got to forgive is ourselves. Then once we give ourselves that gift, now we have that gift, we can give to others. That's number one, or that's number three, whatever I did. Also, ask yourself, am I in general a forgiving person? Some people just are grouch on Sesame Street. I don't know if you've ever seen that, whatever. They don't want to forgive. They don't have to forgive. I'm not gonna. So are you a forgiving person? You have to ask yourself. And then 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, whatever. Sometimes you tell yourself, I'm not ready to forgive. I can't even comprehend forgiveness right now. But I want to forgive. Good. That's good. Move your, if you can't ride your boat into that island, do your, what do you call those, sails? Just move it 10%. That's it. You might not even have forgiveness in the realm of possibility right now, but do you want to forgive? Am I overly dramatic? Is that why you're kind of laughing?
Makes a lot of sense. Yes.
And then understand that, listen, now I'm going to tell you my definition of forgiveness. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a person of deep faith. My definition of forgiveness is I refuse to no longer carry this burden I'm going to give it to God. And then it's none of my business. It's his to deal with. And I walk away from it. And then I have no business going back to it because then I'm questioning my creator. Can you deal with this? And I don't want to question my creator.
Okay. So if that is, because that is a common definition for a lot of people, especially people who are religious, they might say, okay, I forgive you and it's between you and your maker and that's fine. But how do you now deal with the person? Does forgiveness or part of your healing mean that you live with the person or you still have the person around you? Is that a part of the process?
So that's a good question, Joan. But here's the deal. It all depends on the circumstances. Are you reconciling? Are you rebuilding? Are you moving forward? Listen, just because you forgive somebody does not mean you still need to have tea with them every Tuesday or break bread with them. Absolutely not. You can love people from a distance. I do with a lot of my family members, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Ho'oponopono Hawaiian prayer, which is very effective. Listen, every one of my family members who I've set boundaries for, and let me just say, boundaries are like religion. We don't have religion to control other people. We have religion to control ourselves. Boundaries are not for other people. Boundaries are for ourselves. These are my boundaries. If you want to respect them, you're welcome into my circle. But these are my boundaries. If you don't want to respect them, that's fine. Just I don't have you in my circle, or I don't have you intimately in my circle. So to answer your question, which is a very good question, there's times where you forgive somebody. You say, okay, you know what? I'm not going to keep drinking poison and expecting you to get hurt. That makes no sense. I'm going to give the duffel bag of pain that you gave me to God, to the universe, out to nature, whatever, and love you from a distance. I'm going to love you and pray for you and wish you best things from a distance. Now, forgiveness is one thing. Reconciliation is a whole nother thing. Rebuilding is a whole nother thing. See, a lot of people, listen, I'm going to say this and I don't want to offend anybody that's listening. And I can say this because I'm a guy. A lot of times men are tall children and we're so clueless on so many things. A lot of times I'm talking to men and they're like, well, I asked her for forgiveness. So, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's one part of a 10-part program. Forgiveness is just, well, first of all, you don't ask for forgiveness, you earn it if you're serious. That's number one. That's why you should tell your partner, especially if you betrayed them, I'm doing everything in my power to earn your forgiveness. You don't ask for forgiveness. You didn't ask for permission to do the nonsense you did. Don't ask for forgiveness. You earn it by building trust or whatever, but I'm going on a tangent. So absolutely, forgiveness just means forgiveness. Now, if somebody doesn't have them in their life anymore, pray for them because listen, you want to put your head on the pillow at night, Joan, with a loving, light heart. The reason angels can fly is because they take themselves lightly. We don't want to go into bed with all of this burden. We want to say, no, I love you from a distance. I forgive you. I'm going to be kind, even though you treat me like crap. One of the things that floats around social media all the time, and I can't stand it, is I am a good person, but if you treat me this way, then I'm going to treat you that way. And it's like, well, then what are you, a leaf in the wind? It's like if the wind blows south, you're going to go south, and if it blows east, you're going to go. No, you treat, which is why I don't like, and I know I'm going on a tangent, I apologize. I have a very hard time with treat others as you'd want to be treated. I don't necessarily agree with that. I love the Bible. I live, eat, sleep the Bible, but I'm not going to treat others how they want to be. So many people don't have any self-love. I don't want you to treat me with no love.
Yeah.
So I'm going to treat you with the good, wonderful, decent human being I am. Doesn't mean I have to associate with you, break bread with you, drink tea on Tuesdays. Means I'm going to treat you with the respect that I have for myself. Okay, I'm going to be quiet.
I think what you've just described and what you've just said is probably going to give a lot of people some rest, because I think the expectation is always forgiveness means rebuilding, reconciliation, and there's no difference. It's one and the same. But hearing that people can set boundaries, you can decide who you want to bring really close to you or who you want to love from a distance. That's okay too. That's an option. Because I think for me in particular, I think what triggers me is when people who betrayed me come too close. They say certain things and I'm just triggered. And I'm like, why do I need to have them in my space? Why do I have to be close to them? Why can't I just forgive you and love you from a distance and let's all be okay? and kind of set boundaries. I like what you said about boundaries. And I think a lot of people don't really have boundaries, or they say they have boundaries, but it keeps shifting every day. They don't even uphold their own boundaries. So yeah.
You couldn't be more right. I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago. She's this lady, she's I think around 60 years old. She's from California.
Mm-hmm.
And she called me and she says, Mr. J, I have a boundary where I don't have people come to my house. If they want to take me on a date, I meet them at the restaurant. And I tell them this, and that's my non-negotiable boundary. She says, but the other day, somebody came and picked me up, and after our date, he was very forceful in kissing me. And so I said, well, why do you think that was? And she said, I don't know. And so we got talking, and long story short, she admitted, she said, well, I did tell him at the beginning of the day, listen, since you're driving from such a far distance, why don't you come pick me up at my house and we can go whatever. And I said, so wait a minute. You told him that you usually don't ever have people come to your house. You have them meet at the restaurant. And then you compromised and negotiated and watered down your boundaries. I said, okay, listen, we teach people how to treat us. You told him that your boundaries are negotiable. So if he's going to kiss you at the end of the night and you say no, he's going to be like, you already said no and yes and yes and no. So go ahead. Now, listen, that doesn't mean, Joan, that we have to be stiff to our boundaries. Sometimes in some situations, there are certain times we can have some wiggle room, but we just have to be conscious of that and on top of our boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think as we're coming to the end of the year, because I use the end of the year as a reflective period, I think everyone who's listening should reflect on their boundaries. If you don't have one, now's a good time to start creating some healthy boundaries for yourself when it comes to try to deal with your trauma, and especially at Christmas time, it's all family members and stuff. If you have trauma in that area, then just be aware of the triggers like we talked about, and practice some of the things that Mr. J has taught us today. Jeez, get the rubber band. I like the rubber, just snap yourself. I think that would work perfectly for me. So yeah, so I love that.
I just want to say, if you don't mind, some of the things, because you just brought up the holidays, first of all, let me just say this. I hope nobody does this, but I want people to know they do have the choice to cancel a holiday. If you go to your family's house and all you do is hear criticisms and condemnations and why aren't you married and why didn't you take the vaccination and how come you're not pregnant, you can cancel a holiday. That is your adult right. I hope nobody does do that, but I want to say this. There's a couple techniques and tactics that I do encourage people to do if they go home for the holidays or they have family members that are tricky. Instead of saying difficult, I say tricky people. And this is a couple things. Number one, if you know a family member who is always got something nasty to say, as hard as it is, immediately do what's called a safety injection. And what I mean by that is, let's just say you walk into the house. Let's just say it's your Aunt Beatrice, who's always got something negative to say. The minute you see her, you give her 2 compliments. Oh my God, Aunt Beatrice, that lipstick on you looks amazing. And where did you get that skirt? I'm jealous. Because what happens is a lot of people that come from a feeling of insecurity, they want to put others down to lift themselves up. But if you inject some security in them, you're going to be less of a target. That's number one. Number two, I tell people, wear a piece of jewelry. It could be earrings, it could be a bracelet, an anklet, whatever. And that symbolizes a happy place. I don't care if it's horseback riding in California or in Cancun. And the minute people start saying stuff that, you don't like, wiggle some of that jewelry, your earrings, whatever, and immediately go back to Cancun with a martini on the beach, Another thing I have people do is Superman used to wear a breastplate that was bulletproof. Mm-hmm. Wonder Woman back in the 70s, I don't know if I'm aging myself. She had bracelets that used to, they're made from feminum, from the island of Amazonia. And from feminum. And what they do is they have bullets bounce off. So I used to do this myself. Before I'd walk into a family member's house, this was years ago before I had boundaries, I would symbolizing putting on my Superman suit and my feminine bracelets from Wonder Woman. And it was actually a close family member, unfortunately. And I'd be sitting down. The minute I'd hear condemnation or attacks, I'd visualize, shh, deflect, or I'd puff out my chest, and that would be me deflecting those bullets. And then it also makes your body feel like you're confident and big. Yeah. Whew. So you walk out of that house saying, yes, instead of, crouched over feeling deflated and defeated. Now, the last thing I want to say, just because I don't want to bore you with all my things, sometimes you need what's called a hotel tree, okay? So let me explain real quick what that is. You ever walk into a hotel or a bank around the holidays and you see this big, big, beautifully decorated holiday tree or Christmas tree? Listen, there's no memory with it. There's no significance to it. It's just a big, beautiful tree. A lot of people around the holidays, especially if they go through an affair or infidelity, they don't want to put up a tree because then there's all the bulbs of when they got married. So I say, put up a hotel tree, put up a beautiful tree with beautiful bulbs. That way your kids can enjoy it. You can enjoy it, but it doesn't have the painful memories along with it. I'll stop there because I can talk forever.
Oh, many tips. So there you have it. Like so many tips for the holidays. I like the injection one. Just give 2 compliments as soon as you see the person, because we all have that. And Teresa always has a thing to say about, the usual, the usual stuff. Some of the ones you mentioned. You look like you gained some weight. Like, yeah. Okay. Are you still working out? Yeah. Okay. Why are you still single? Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We know them and we all have them. And sometimes we can't avoid them. So at least here are some tips that can help you get through the holiday season without you trying to kill someone or succeeding.
Yeah. Because sometimes you're sitting there and you're thinking, man, I love my outfit, but I'll look good in orange too if you keep opening your mouth.
Orange is the new black. Hello. Awesome. Okay. So I know that you did mention that you're an intrapersonal coach as well. So, and I know that you did say that the relationship you have with yourself is the most important. Why is that? And do people even think about the relationship they have with themselves?
Nope.
Okay.
No. I'm going to tell you something. I am a wedding officiant as well, right? And so a lot of times, Joan, I will be in front of 2 people, marrying them, usually young, 20s, 30s. And I'm thinking to myself, they're exchanging lifelong I do's, and they don't even know who the I am is. So what happens is we come to the marital table with expectations. And I always say expectations lead to frustrations. Half the time, people want their spouse, their partner, their significant other to heal them from their pain, their traumas, to save them from something, when their partners are coming to the marital table with the same expectations. And then before you know it, it's like, oh, you can't save me. You can't save me either. Goodbye. Good luck. Good riddance. So getting to know ourselves is crucial. But here's the thing. Just like forgiveness, it's not a one and done deal. Every day you have to renew your forgiveness for yourself, for others around you. Every day you have to know who you are. Listen, are you the same person now than you were 5 years ago? No. And you're not going to be the same person 5 years from today that you are now. So I tell people all the time, far more than human beings, we're human evolvements. We're constantly changing. So we constantly have to get to know our new self. Just like if we're married, by the way, I just celebrated my 20th anniversary. Congratulations, me. But if we're married, we not only have to get to know ourselves, we have to continuously get to know our spouse, because just like we're changing and evolving, so are they. So it's an ever-ending process. Adulting is hard.
Yep. Yep.
However, the alternative is to go back to childhood, and I wouldn't want to do that. So I'll take adulting.
Yeah, I'm with you. So how can people start to know themselves better? Because I think it's easy to say, oh, know yourself, but there's like, how? I know me. Like, I have a job, I have kids, and like, people don't really know what to look for or really how to dig deep to know who they are and know when they're ready to commit to someone else and be in a healthy relationship.
Absolutely. And then you have people that are married, for 30, 40, 50 years, and their identity is a mom. Their identity is a wife. Their identity is a lawyer. That's not your identity. These are extensions of who you are. One of the easiest things you could do actually is ask yourself, what do I read when I'm not forced to read something? That question right there changed my trajectory of college. I went into college in criminal justice. I wanted to be a detective. And then one time I heard on a podcast, what are you reading when you're not supposed to read? And man, I used to read constantly, every chance I got, psychology books. And I got thinking, well, geez, if that's my passion, if that's what gives me purpose in life, why the crap do I want to be a detective? I like detective work, and it would be a job and it would be a career, but it wouldn't be a passion. And that changed my whole. So ask yourself, what are you reading during your spare time when you don't have to read? And that's a good indication of some of your passions. What feeds your soul? So many times we're brought up in a religion and we continue on with that religion because that's what we know, or that's what our parents knew. But then we get to a deeper place and we're like, I'm not sure this denomination works for me, and that's okay, so really doing the deep dive of what feeds me, what gives me passion, what gives me purpose. I'll tell you something. Coaching for me is not just a job. I'm fed. It gives me passion and purpose. And I'll tell you something. A lot of the times I talk to a lot of colleagues that are also betrayal trauma practitioners, and they'll say, don't you cry every night in the shower because you hear bad stories every night? And I say, no, and I don't. Now, don't get me wrong. I hear some of the most horrific stories and I do feel bad. But when I'm in the shower, I am smiling because I'm thinking, thank you, God, for allowing me to help somebody today. So I tell people, if you're crying in the shower, is this your passion? It's a great career and it might give you some purpose, but does it give you passion? So you got to find what gives you passion. That's how you're going to get to know yourself. Yes, your kids give you passion, but you know what? When they're out of the house and they moved a country away and they got 3 kids and a family of their own, and they come visit you once every 4 years, that can't be your passion. Your passion's got to be what feeds you. And listen, if your passion is popping zits, go pop some zits. Wherever your passion, you do you.
You do you. People are making a lot of money from doing that. Trust me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Pimple Popper. Have you ever heard of her?
Exactly. Yep.
My son got me obsessed with her. I can't believe it.
No.
He's like, Papa, come here. Look at this. And I'm like, ew, gross. And then I can't stop watching it.
So satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah. So I told my son, I said, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to call myself. I need my services after watching this.
Trauma. Okay. So final question for you. So maybe we have people who've been listening and are thinking, okay, yes, I do have betrayal trauma. I haven't really overcome it. It's weighing me down. It's affected my life. I want to do better. I want to have a better life. How can they work with you? How do you work with people?
Okay. Well, let me tell you something. And again, I'm sorry, I can't just give you a 2-sentence response. I apologize. It all depends on where on the trauma spectrum you are. For example, I get calls from people who just found numbers under their mattress, or they just found the lip gloss in their car, or they just found the blonde or the brunette hair in their car when their hair is black. And so I get people literally on the phone where they're bear hugging the toilet, vomiting and screaming, no, please, no, this can't be true. Then I get people that are 40 years out of betrayal, that they've never dealt with it, and now it's bothering them physically, financially, emotionally, mentally. So really, it all depends on the spectrum, where they are, where I meet them. I give people what's called an IHP, and I'll tell you exactly what that is. I was a certified special ed teacher for many years, and with kids with special needs, you have to give them what's called an IEP, and that's an individualized education plan. Okay. So what I did was I took that model and I created in my coaching an individualized healing plan. Because listen, you're going to heal from trauma much differently from somebody else based on many things, based on even what hand do you write with? Because if you live in a right-handed world when you're left-handed, that can change your outlook on something. Where on the spectrum are you on your siblings? If you're an older sibling, you're going to look at life from a different lens than say from a younger sibling. Race, there's different races that deal with trauma differently from many different perspectives. Gender, males and females handle trauma much differently, whatever. So all of these things have a play. Resiliency. What's your support system? If you have a good, strong support system now, you're going to heal from trauma differently from somebody who doesn't have a strong support system. So really, it's just so individualized. But that's what I do is I start with asking them, some questions for their individual healing plan, ask them what they're struggling with, and then I directly talk to that person. There's no one size fits all when it comes to trauma at all. But that's what I do, and then we move forward together.
Okay, awesome. So it sounds like wherever you are on the spectrum, Mr. J can help you. At least you can do that. The IHP. We'll start with that first. And
yes, I can help you help yourself. Because I don't listen. All I do is I steer the ship. That's all I do. If you're not going to be paddling and working hard with those oars, I'm not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. I can steer you in the right direction, but you got to do the blood, sweat, and tears. That's the only way you're going to heal.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Final words for our listeners. Any final tips?
Well, I have a zillion, but I know you have a time limit, so I'll just give you one. If you're walking down the road and a rattlesnake bites you and injects venom in you, are you going to pick up that rattlesnake and put its fangs in your arm 10 times? No, you're not going to. But this is what happens. Other people give us pain. We give ourselves suffering. Somebody hurts us once, and then we just want to replay it and then tell ourselves a story. It's because I'm ugly. My butt was big. My breasts were small. My pecs were this. We want to give ourselves a story that's so untrue. It's not even funny, because what happens is that they hit us at our core insecurities. So that's the filter we're seeing. So other people give us pain. Don't give yourself suffering. Don't do that. And I'll tell you something, now that I just mentioned that snake thing. In the history of mankind or womankind or humankind, nobody's ever died from a snake bite. Nobody's ever died from a snake bite. What people die from is from the venom getting into your brains and getting into your heart and stopping your heart. So when somebody hurts you, when somebody betrays you, when somebody offends you, when somebody traumatizes you, don't let that venom get to your heart. Stop it immediately.
Stop it immediately. Love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. J, for being here with us today. Lots of good tips about betrayal trauma. And I do hope for anyone who's going through it, you can reach out to him. I'll include his website on the show notes so that you can get the help that you need. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with us, Mr. J. I will see you all same time next week on iRise Conversations with Joan.
Thank you.